Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again, y'all. Look out. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Delighted to have you in with us in this hour. And in this hour, two conversations on the backside of this hour. Son of Jacques Cousteau, Philippe Cousteau Jr., and a special guest join us live in studio to talk about their work building a global youth movement to save our oceans. Climate change, global warming, these things matter to us around here. And we'll talk about that with these honored guests who will be in studio with us on the backside of this hour. We continue now our conversation, given all the breaking news in the Middle East. We continue now with the brilliant public intellectual Mark Lamont Hill, author, professor. He has a book out about the subject that we're discussing. It's called Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics. We'll talk about the limits of progressive politics when we move forward. But the breaking news today is that Israel has agreed to 4-hour pauses in Gaza military operations. As I said earlier, this would be laughable if it weren't so serious. But Blinken, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, apparently has finally been successful at getting Israel to agree to these pauses. Bibi Netanyahu initially pushed back against that, Mark Lamont here. But before we get to why we can't seem to have a civil conversation about this issue, your thoughts on that breaking news out of Israel?
It speaks directly to the limits of progressive politics. I mean, there are people right now who are going to call this a victory, Mm-hmm. But if this were any other crisis, we'd be saying that this is an epic failure. Mm-hmm. A humanitarian pause, first of all, was always deliberately vague. It's technocratic. A pause could be an hour. It could be 15 minutes. And now they're saying 4 hours right now. And then what could happen in a week or an hour, as they say, well, Hamas is so vigilant that we have to shorten the pause periods to a day, to an hour or 15 minutes. We just don't know. I mean, the fundamental problem with the humanitarian pause is that it doesn't give adequate time for people's needs to be met. We have never seen this amount of carnage in Gaza, and we've seen awful moments in Gaza, like in 2014, but we've never, or 2020, we've never seen anything like this. The Gaza Strip, for anyone, people who haven't been there, is 25 miles long and it's 5 miles wide. It's very, 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 very dense. To move 2.2 million people around in such a small space is nearly impossible. And over a 4-hour period to move someone from, say, Khan Yunis, which is in the north, just to get 25 miles, you can't do that quickly with 2.2 million people. It's like telling somebody to get across LA in 20 minutes mm-hmm. at 8 a.m. So,
Yeah.
And so we gave you time. Mm-hmm. It's only 2 miles, Tavis. Why did it take you 2 hours? Mm-hmm. Right? And so we have to think about that from a practical standpoint. People's needs are hospital, their medicine, it's shelter. It's actually not just houses, but shelter from weaponry. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things happening, and 4 hours simply isn't enough. It's not enough to move people. It's not enough to get the people's needs met. Yeah. And what the problem is, because, and this is the last thing I'll say, because the Israeli state has been very clear in saying that that normal conventions of war around targeting civilians are taking sufficient care to make sure that civilians are not targeted. Because those things are not being met, after the 4 hours over, there's a really good chance you could still be in the line of fire as a Gazan civilian. Yeah. And that's why we've seen thousands of innocent people killed already.
Yeah. When I saw this news breaking today, that they were going to agree to these humanitarian 4-hour pauses, this is metaphorical. It's an allegory, but you'll take my point, I think, Mark. I thought about the line from Malcolm, if you put a knife 9 inches in my back,
mm-hmm.
and you pull it out 6, that's really not progress, right? There's still 3 inches of knife in my back. And so right. I take your point. It's metaphorical, but I thought of Malcolm's words. That's really not progress when you pull it 6 inches out. I still got 3 inches in my back, man. And so these pauses, I don't know what is to be accomplished really by these pauses. It seems to me to be much ado about nothing, but that's my read of it. And I'm with you. I don't see this as a victory. Speaking of a victory, we've already established in this conversation that the State Department still is holding firm on not allowing any one of their personnel, including, of course, Secretary of State Blinken and, of course, the president in the White House. Nobody is using the term ceasefire. Nobody is allowed to use that term. Nobody's allowed to use the term de-escalation. We were talking earlier, and you saw this full-page ad in the New York Times. Over 350 black clergy signing off on this letter, this full-page ad, rather, in the New York Times. Ceasefire now. The protests are growing. The calls for ceasefire are growing. And yet there are many in this conversation who think that a ceasefire, that a de-escalation would be an absolute victory for Hamas. To those who feel that way, you say what?
That a ceasefire is the most civil, humane, reasonable, and I'm going to add legal way to achieve any remaining semblance of justice. The argument that a ceasefire only emboldens Hamas, only creates more violence, only creates more unrest, is not one that I don't take seriously, right? I understand I understand their argument. The problem with that argument is, even if I were to concede that point, which I don't, but even if I were to concede that point, to bomb Gaza to the point where millions of people will never have homes again, where where tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people die, will not only effectively cleanse or at least depopulate Gaza, but it will create far more terrorism, far more violence. What do you think the 14-year-old boy who has to watch his children, his friends die is getting? You think he's not getting radicalized by this right now? Mm-hmm. You know, I spoke to a man in Gaza yesterday, and I was in tears as he told me, Tavis, as he told me that he watched an unfed dog go out and finally eat off the carcass of a boy of a small boy whose carcass had been buried under the rubble. This is where we are. And if people think that that's not going to produce radicalization, that that's not going to produce more violence, not just from what's going on in the Gaza Strip, but also in surrounding areas. What does Hezbollah do now? Yeah. What does Iran do now?
Hold that thought. I want to come to Hezbollah. I want to come to Iran. And you saw that we had brief but significant military operations inside of Syria. The U.S. Announced yesterday. We dropped some bombs and blew a few things up in Syria yesterday, trying to remind these Arab nations, don't get involved in this. There are concerns, increasing concerns about the potential escalation of this war. We'll talk about that and a great deal more. Our guest is Mark Lamont Hill. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom. Escalade IQ, this the intro to the all-electric Cadillac perfected like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku, this is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit, you hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Dearly, beloved, clearly, we're hustling. Bustin', truckin'. Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com.
Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with SCHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. Today I spoke with Tatiana, a community manager for JP Morgan Chase.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Tatiana Roberts. I am a community manager for JP Morgan Chase. I have to honestly say that this has been the most fulfilling position that I've ever had, where I get to give back to the community because I saw my mom's struggles. That's really what fuels what I do to make sure that that the community has all the access to the resources that my mother didn't have.
So for the mother who's in business, what are 3 quick tips you can give to ensure that they're on the right path to accessing financial support from a bank like Chase?
Say number 1, just make sure that you're checking your credit on a consistent basis and taking action to, either fix your credit, maintain your credit, or rebuild your credit. The second thing would be budget. I know that B word is kind of like ugly for, right? A lot of people don't like that B word, but it has to be done. We need to tell our money where to go. The last thing is to build a network of supporters that are going to lift you up.
The community building here in Crenshaw is that network. So visit the Chase Community Center on Crenshaw and Vernon. Meet a banker today. Tell them about your business. I'm Maisha Cairo in the community for KBLA with JP Morgan Chase.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
I'm pressing my way toward a conversation with Mark Lamont Hill about the letter that I read twice already from somebody I've known for 30 years who can't abide the fact that Mark and I are friends and that Mark and I are having this conversation. But before I get to that and this conversation about why it's so impossible for us to have a civil conversation about Palestine, that's why Mark called his book Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics. Let me give you the microphone, Mark, right quick to talk about two things that you were basically working your way toward anyway. One is this notion of radicalization. When these folk in Gaza, in Palestine, when they see what's happening, they're losing their family members, they're losing their loved ones, they're losing their parents, they're losing their siblings, they're losing their cousins. So many of these people who are being murdered in Palestine, as we know, are young people and babies. So talk to me about future radicalization. And so when Bibi says we're gonna crush, we're gonna destroy Hamas, not so fast, because all you're doing is radicalizing another generation of young people. So this thing never ends, number one. So talk about radicalization, and then talk about, you think, the threat, the very real threat we're facing right now of escalation in the region. So those are my two words for you: radicalization and escalation. Take it away.
Yeah. Let's talk about escalation, and this actually connects to the letter your friend wrote. When I talked about the Iron Dome years ago, I didn't lament that Israel could defend itself. That was never the point. It was in the middle of a siege, and what I was saying is normally in war, when both sides are taking so many losses, eventually the loss of your own citizens makes you stop at some point and say, "Hey, let's come to a peace deal." The problem is there's such an imbalance between Gaza and Israel, which is why when you say the Israel-Gaza war or Israel's war on Hamas, it makes it sound like it's two equivalents fighting when in fact it's not that at all. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is when you have an Iron Dome system, which is a missile defense system, it also serves, I was arguing, an offensive function to the extent that Israel Hamas does not have the capacity to send rockets targeted. They don't have the capacity to defeat Israel in a military war. They know that. And this is not a defense of Hamas. This is saying, look, this is part of the danger of Hamas. Mm-hmm. And so, but Israel has no motivation to stop because they can keep intercepting Hamas's missiles and keep killing more innocent people. My concern isn't for Hamas. My concern is for the innocent people who keep getting killed. And because the Iron Dome has expanded Israel's military advantage, and the United States has pledged to always give Israel a qualitative military advantage, which I talk about in my book, Except for Palestine, it means that the war will never stop. The war will never stop. That's what I'm afraid of. And if the war never stops, yes, it leads to radicalization because 50% of the Gazan population is under 18 years old, 49% to be exact. So that means that those babies who never voted for Hamas got elected 17 years ago. Mm-hmm. So most of the people, more than half of Gaza didn't vote for them. They only got 44% of the vote back then. Almost nobody alive in Gaza right now voted for Hamas. And none of these babies who are getting killed voted for Hamas. And none of these babies who are watching their friends get killed voted for Hamas. So they don't give a damn about Hamas at that level. What they give a damn about is that they keep getting killed. They keep getting shot at. Their mothers, their fathers, their neighbors are getting killed. Their homes are being crushed. Their mosques are being destroyed. Their churches are being destroyed. All violations of international law, by the way. All of this is happening, and they're watching it. That's not going to make them want peace. That's not going to make them want to not get organized and fight what they will believe is a righteous fight. So we've seen this in Afghanistan. We've seen this in Iraq. We've seen this in Sudan. We've seen this in Libya. We could go all around the world. We see this movie over and over again. The problem is there's too much money in the U.S. defense industry. Wall Street is making money off the war. They don't want the violence to stop. Israel wants to destroy Hamas, so they don't want the violence to stop. Hamas knows they can't win, but they want to bring so much violence to Gaza that the whole world loses sympathy and solidarity with Israel, so they don't want the war to end. The problem, as Gil Scott-Heron says, is everybody wants peace. The problem is you can't make no money off of it. So what we got to do is reimagine this whole thing, right? And so if we don't, you're going to see Hezbollah get more involved in the north, in particular in the north. If we don't get involved, you're going to see other Arab nations. This is what the Abraham Accords were partly they called it a peace deal. It wasn't a peace deal. It was an arms deal. It was an arms deal with countries that were never at war anyway. You ain't never heard about the Israel versus Morocco. That was never a beef. Me and Tavis Smiley don't need to sign a peace deal because we ain't never had no beef, right? Israel and Morocco haven't had a military issue in over 70 years. So all it was an arms deal. So those nations won't get involved, but there are nations that will get involved, which then brings the U.S. involved. And what we don't want is World War III. My goal is to create an agreement where no Jews get harmed, where no Palestinians get harmed, where no Druze get harmed, where no foreign wars get prosecuted, and where we don't get ourselves involved in it. And the answer to that is ceasefire.
And yet the administration at the moment does not want to hear ceasefire. I repeat once again that there's a full-page ad that we saw in the New York Times signed by over 350 black clergy demanding the Biden administration immediately call for a ceasefire. But that language, ceasefire, de-escalation, again, not language that the Biden administration is prepared to use as yet. The best they can do at the moment are these 4-hour pauses that we learned today are going to start happening today, in fact. These 4-hour pauses in Gaza that Israel has agreed to take. Let me turn now, in the 9 minutes I have left with you, let me turn now to this broader conversation about why it is so impossible for us to have a civil conversation about these issues. I look at the things that are being said online that are vicious. I referenced earlier Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Congresswoman out of Florida, Jewish sister, who basically said if you don't vote with her position on this, you ain't got a soul. I look at Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian-American serving in Congress, who got censured yesterday for her defense of this statement, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I look at the letter that I read already twice from a guy I've known for 30 years that I thought was just way across the line. I don't think friends talk to friends that way. And sometimes you got to fight. Sometimes you got to fight with your friends. No question about it. Sometimes you got to fight with your friends because your friends ain't always right. But I don't believe there's anything that we ever have to say to another human being that we cannot find a way to say or do in love. It's not always easy. But telling me F my friend Mark Lamont Hill is not expressing yourself in love, and you can do better than that. And so I'm concerned about the incivility of this conversation. I'm not naive about all the backstory and all the history, but why, Mark Lamont Hill, can we not seem to have a civil conversation about this and come to a place where we acknowledge that the life of a Palestinian baby has the same value as the life of a Jewish baby and vice versa?
You know, I think part of it is that history. I mean, I would say, you know, and first let me just say to my sister Rashida Tlaib, I was appalled that she was censured by Congress. We've had Klan leaders in Congress, child molesters in Congress, adulterers in Congress, and we somehow haven't censured them. But I will say this, one more thing, is that in 1842, a man named Joshua Reed Giddings was censured on the House floor. And he was censured after slaves had revolted aboard a ship called the Creole, and they sailed to Nassau, and they got free. And my point is, he was censured for condemning slavery. So the U.S. House of Representatives has a long history of censoring people on the wrong side of history. So y'all should just hold that in your pockets, right? It may turn to be a badge of honor. I'm just going to say that and leave that right there. But when it comes to this issue, part of it is there is such a long history of anti-Semitism in the world. The hatred of Jewish people has such a deep and long-standing, lingering history, and we take that very seriously. And the challenge is, Zionist movement was so bound up in providing relief and peace and safety for Jewish people, which they deserve, because every place that they've been the minority, they have been subjected to hatred and pogroms and murder and false allegations and smears and blood libels and all the things. It's absolutely true. And for that reason, Jewish people deserve safety and protection. The challenge is Zionism, political Zionism, the movement that led to the formation of the State of Israel. It conflates the political dimension of this to the religious dimension of this. And so what ends up happening is we're taught that Zionism is the only expression of Judaism, and that Israel is the ultimate embodiment of the Jewish kind of spiritual and political imagination. What does that mean? It means that if I criticize Israel, I'm criticizing Jewishness. If I challenge Zionism, I'm challenging Jews. If I don't agree with the state of Israel as it is formed, then I am saying that I don't want Jews to be safe. And the truth is, I want Jews to be as safe as anybody else in this world. I believe that every single person deserves the same thing. And as you said, all these babies are worth the same. All of them. But we can't. But the problem is we've been conditioned to believe that those two things are tied up. I'm going to say two more quick things that I think are really important. One is, for black folk, at the political level, we believed in nationalism. Marcus Garvey believed in the Zionist movement. W.E.B. Du Bois believed in the Zionist movement because we knew what it was like to be oppressed. We knew what it was like to be in the wilderness, right? And we understood what that meant to want to get your own space so that you could be free. And so we identified with that tradition. So we've long identified with that. That identification with the Zionist political movement is also tied to the fact that our own liberation struggles here have happened partly because Jewish brothers and sisters have stood next to us. And they have stood next to us so deeply. And I think there's a sense of betrayal from some of our Jewish brothers and sisters when they say, we've stood next to you, why are you not standing next to us for our issue? But the problem, the contradiction there is, I will stand next to my Jewish brothers, I'll go into the fire, I'll get fired from 10 CNNs, I will get shot for, I'll take a bullet for my Jewish brothers and sisters. But we got to all be on the right side of history. And standing with Israel is not standing with Jewishness any more than standing with Saudi Arabia is standing with Muslimness. We can't look at it that way. And so that's where the disagreement comes. And then finally, our own spiritual traditions are bound up in this. We didn't identify with Exodus. We didn't identify with what it means to get out of Pharaoh's land. We've identified with these stories so much that we feel a religious attachment to the state of Israel and to the Holy Land. And some of that is bound up in our own end of days theories and eschatology and all that stuff. That's another story for another time. But the point is, we got spiritual attachments, religious attachments, political attachments. We got all cultural and social connections. All this stuff makes this thing messy. And so we have to be able to tell the truth to each other in love, be critical of each other in love, and arrive at new political possibilities. But we can't begin from the premise that anybody who has a different position doesn't want me alive. At the same time, we have to recognize that we have open enemies that don't want us alive. But the funkiest part of all of this, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, is some of the people who actually don't love y'all. And when I say y'all, I'm talking to black folk, I'm talking to my Jewish brothers and sisters, I'm talking to women, I'm talking to queer folk, I'm talking to trans folk. A lot of these folk who are emerging from the Trump movement, from the right, they hate Jewish people and love Israel. And so oftentimes we're aligning ourselves politically with people who serve a particular political agenda, which makes sense. We all do that. But let's not confuse the thing here. My Jewish brothers and sisters, I love y'all. I want us to be free. I want every one of us to be free. I want peaceful coexistence. I want Palestine to be free from the river to the sea. But for me, that means everybody's safe, including Jewish brothers and sisters. Not one person should leave that land. Not one person should be vulnerable. Not one person should be harmed. Jew, Druze, Arab, I don't care what you are. You should be able to stay and live in safety, dignity, self-determination, and justice.
I'll close on this note. I'm sure I speak for Mark in this regard, not that I need to, but I'm getting sick and tired of these false equivalencies. to black folk. People suggesting if these were black people, no. It's a false equivalency, number one. I ain't got time to unpack it. And number two, it's furthermore not true because in Rwanda and in other places around the globe, did nobody rush in to help them when there was ethnic cleansing going on? So don't get me started on that. Finally, I'll just say this. To Mark's point about anti-Semitism, I believe it's next week. If not, it's the week after, but I think it's next week. One of my I do have some other Jewish friends who have not sent me letters saying F my other friends, but one of my friends is a guy named Steve Leader. He is the rabbi, very well known, the rabbi of the largest synagogue west of Mississippi. It's the Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles. We've known each other for 30 years, been dear friends, and he's coming on this program, the rabbi, major player, to talk for an hour about anti-Semitism and why there are certain things that they regard as anti-Semitism that we do not. And Mark just made the point. If I don't agree with your politics, that does not mean I'm anti-Semitic. So Steve and I are going to get into it for an hour, talking about anti-Semitism, what is and what isn't. That happens on this program, I believe, next week. For now, let me thank my dear friend and brother Mark Lamont Hill. Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics is his book. You can follow his YouTube channel. You got to check out his YouTube channel. It's at Mark Lamont Hill Official. That's his YouTube channel, Mark Lamont Hill Official. And Mark, I appreciate you. You're working your witness, and just know, brother, there's no daylight ever between us, and there's nobody ever going to tell me I can't talk to you on my program or any place else for that matter.
I love you, man. I appreciate you. And tell that friend of yours that I say F him too. I forgive him because he don't know no better.
That's Mark Lamont Hill. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. New York's Attorney General has rested her civil fraud case against former President Trump with testimony by his daughter. Attorney General Letitia James claimed that Ivanka Trump benefited personally from grossly inflated numbers for her dad's businesses. Ivanka testified she wasn't involved in putting financial statements together, but emails revealed her acknowledging them. Former President Trump's lawyers present their defense Monday. A man once accused of the beating and rape of a jogger in 1989 will soon be on the New York City Council. African-American Yusuf Salam was one of the Central Park Pride men detained for the crime that received national headlines and a full-page newspaper ad from Donald Trump calling for their execution. The men were eventually exonerated by DNA evidence. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Starting off in Long Beach, we've got a minor wreck on the 405 northbound at Cherry Avenue with a couple of vehicles in your left lane, so look for some slowing there approaching. Up ahead in Inglewood, 405 northbound, still very heavy from Century Boulevard up to Santa Monica Freeway. We had a stalled vehicle 405 north at the 10 West connector. Slowing on the 10 westbound, Western Avenue to Robertson.
Make your next lunch a lunch combo from Buffalo Wild Wings. Choose from wings, street tacos, and more. Head to Buffalo Wild Wings or order online at buffalowildwings.com at participating locations for a limited time, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Price and participation vary by location. Taxes extra. See menu for details.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A bad night for both of LA's NBA teams, and both of them are still looking for their first road win this season. The Lakers were spanked in Houston last night. They lost by 34. Anthony Davis did not play. Muscle spasms in his left hip. His status for Friday's game at Phoenix is uncertain. The Lakers are 0-5 on the road. The Clippers lost by 7 at Brooklyn. They committed 6 of their 15 turnovers in the fourth quarter. 12 points and 5 assists for James Harden. The Clippers are 0-4 on the road. Major League Baseball now has 2 black managers, Dave Roberts of the Dodgers and Ron Washington of the Angels. The 71-year-old Washington was hired by the Angels on Wednesday. Washington was Atlanta's third base coach the past 6 seasons. He managed the Texas Rangers from 2007 to 2014. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though?
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Get great deals all month long when you shop Black Friday every day at Lowe's. Get 25% off all artificial Christmas trees and tree decor. Valid through 11/15. Tree decor includes ornaments, toppers, collars, and skirts. While supplies last, selection varies by location.
No young person should ever have to worry about having a safe place to sleep at night, or whether anyone cares about them.
But the reality is, 1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year.
For over 50 years, Covenant House has been helping youth in crisis and giving them the support and tools they need to succeed in life. To learn more, go to covenanthouse.org today. Thank you for caring.
Only 1 in 5 people with autism are employed, despite many having the skill set and desire to work.
Maybe it's because employers don't know what kind of jobs they can do. Like, what about a programmer?
That's a job for someone with autism.
How about a healthcare worker?
Yep, that is too. People with autism can do a lot of different jobs, but often get overlooked due to outdated stigmas. Introducing WIN by Autism Speaks. We help businesses lead the way in inclusive hiring.
What about a ranch hand?
To learn more, go to autismspeaks.org/win.
Thinking about hosting a podcast and don't know where to start? Morris Media Studios has you covered. We're a professional podcast and voiceover studio located in Leimert Park. We specialize in recording and live streaming audio and video podcasts. Let us help you set up, record, and distribute your podcast. Hosting a podcast is a great way to bring awareness to your business, product, or good cause. For more info, visit morrismediastudios.com or give us a call at 323-815-4204.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and I thank Mark Lamont Hill for that conversation. Cue that music up for me, Miles, from his dad, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. So I thank Mark Lamont Hill for that conversation. This story about Israel and Hamas and Israel and Palestine is so dynamic. I was just saying to Philippe a moment ago, I thank them for their patience to come in studio today to have this conversation, but that breaking news had to be addressed, and so we did. Now, this conversation with Philippe Cousteau, son of Jacques Cousteau. Give me my music, Miles. Give me my music. Give me my music. Yeah. So many of you will, let it ride for a second, many of you will recognize that. So Philippe Cousteau Jr. is the son of Jacques Cousteau, and he joins us now for a career conversation, and we'll certainly talk about environmental justice and more expressly his mission to save our oceans. He's brought with him a special guest who I'll introduce a little bit later in this conversation. But I'm delighted to welcome Philippe Cousteau to this studio. Philippe, how are you today, sir?
Tavis, I'm great, man. Thank you so much for having us. We're really, really excited.
No, it's my great delight to have you here. When you hear that music, I know what I think as a fan of your father's work. When you hear it, what do you think?
You know, and it was my grandfather, actually.
I said grandfather. I said grandfather, yes.
Because my father was Philippe Sr., so
Sure, exactly.
that's easy to get confused. You know, boy, you know, I grew up, but that was the soundtrack of my youth, you know, and it brings back amazing memories of spending time with my grandfather and hearing all of his stories about his extraordinary adventures all over the world and how much it inspired me to do the work that I do now.
Yeah. When you look back on your grandfather's work, and I'm glad you corrected me. I meant grandfather, I said father. When you look back on your grandfather's work, what do you make of the enduring legacy of what he accomplished?
You know, when I think about my grandfather, I'm reminded, and I like to remind people that a little context. You know, we as humans have been traveling the ocean, the surface of the ocean for millennia, but it's really only been since about 78 years that my grandfather first set foot in the Marne River outside of Paris with this funky contraption on his back that became scuba diving to test out the ability for people to actually swim freely into the ocean. So prior to that work, all we knew really about the ocean was the trash we dumped into it and the seafood that we pulled out. No one had ever really explored the ocean, and it was something that my grandfather pioneered. And so when we think about that, basically one human lifetime that humanity has been exploring the ocean beneath the waves. It's not a very long time. And everything that we've learned in that period of time about both how critical the ocean is to our life and just how much we have destroyed it since the end of World War II, since we saw this massive growth economically and from a population perspective on this planet. And so I'm oftentimes just reminded about how far we've come, how much we've learned, but how much work we have to do to build balance for the system that is 71% of this planet and that makes life possible on Earth.
People lose sight of that. We call it planet Earth, and it is, but it's 71% water. It's worth reminding people of that sometimes. It is 71% water. To your point of a moment ago, let me just ask you a direct question. How bad is it? How bad is it? How bad have we made it? Let me put it that way.
You know, here's a couple jarring statistics. In the past 40 years, so in my lifetime, we've lost half of the world's biodiversity. The amount or the diversity of living things on this planet. And that matters not only because we like, ostensibly life in nature, but because we are part of a system that requires diversity on this planet. Think of bees pollinating our plants and our crops and our food. Without healthy bee populations, which are crashing, by the way, our whole agricultural system is unsustainable. That feeds billions of people on this planet. So that's just one example about how we rely on biodiversity. We think about half the world's coral reefs have gone, 90% of the large fish species are gone. We think about deforestation. We think about rising sea temperatures because, of course, the big words that is on everyone's lips is climate change. But climate change is an ocean problem because the ocean drives our climate. And so as the ocean changes, it is changing because it's absorbing heat, it's warming up, it's expanding, and that is what's driving most of the climatic changes around the world. And when we talk about climate change, again, we're talking about food, we're talking about water, we're talking about storms, we're talking about things that are very real and affect people's lives every single day.
I wonder, of all the things that we could and should be addressing under the rubric of the damage we've done to the planet, I wonder whether or not oceans really don't rise, pardon the pun, don't rise to the top of the agenda, in part because even though the planet is 71% water, oceans are out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least when it comes to the heat, we feel the heat. We feel the extreme heat. When El Nino is acting up, we can wrestle with that in real time. But I'm wondering whether or not you think this actually rates for most Americans, because again, we think of the oceans as out there. It's not really on people's radar.
Tavis, you're absolutely right. It's out of sight, out of mind, and it's one of the big challenges that we face is that we can't solve the climate and biodiversity crisis on this planet without restoring and protecting the ocean, full stop. And that is not just the average person in the world today, not just in the United States, but everywhere, but also even policymakers. A lot of policymakers just don't appreciate that we can't solve this crisis without the restoring and protecting the ocean. Yep. And I say restoring because it's not just about sustainability. It's not just about protecting systems. The good news is we also have tools at our disposal to help renew the health of the ocean. And that's what our focus is at Earth Echo, the nonprofit I founded 17 years ago, which is a global youth ocean education and leadership organization, because we have to build a movement of people to do that, or else life on this planet will not be anything that any of us want to experience.
We'll talk about that global youth movement and meet a special young sister named Stephanie when we come forward. Let me just ask you right quick before I come forward. When you say restore, that word seems strange to something so massive. Like, how do you restore something that's already damaged, that's 71% of the planet?
It's a great question. The good news is that the ocean and nature in general has an extraordinary capacity to renew and restore itself if we give it a chance. And so what do I mean by that? A few years ago, my wife and I went to the Marshall Islands to film a show for Discovery Channel. And that is the place where in the 1950s and 60s we conducted 23 nuclear bombs, devastating these atolls for miles around, above and below the surface. But because of the radiation, it became essentially a no man's land, a de facto marine protected area, like a national park in the ocean. And after 60 years, we went back. The radiation is dissipated in the water, still not safe to go on land. And the corals were back. The sharks were back. Life was abundant. And so after the worst fire and brimstone humanity could engineer, giving nature a break allowed it to rebound spectacularly. And so the efforts globally to protect 30% of the ocean and all these things that are happening are really about tapping into that innate power of nature to renew itself.
Our guest is Philippe Cousteau Jr., grandson of Jacques Cousteau. We'll continue when we come forward. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
On your period, sudden gushes happen without warning. But now, you can say goodbye to stand-up gush fears. Thanks to Always Ultra Thins with rapid dry technology. It absorbs gushes 2 times faster than the leading store brand and gives you up to 100% leak-free protection. Hello, clean and comfortable with Always Fear No Gush.
Hey, you. Yeah, you. This is your dentist. Do me a favor and feel the front of your teeth. How grimy are they? Ugh. It's time for a Crest Pro Health reality checkup. That grime is the buildup of plaque bacteria that can cause cavities in just months. You need to switch to Crest Pro Health. While most toothpaste stop working in minutes, Crest Pro Health's antibacterial fluoride protects for up to 12 hours to stop cavities before they start. So pick some up on the way home. Smile. Crest has you covered.
To some, this might sound like a typical family dog. But at Dog Chow, we know that for a veteran suffering from PTSD, this could be the sound of life-saving therapy.
Thanks, Betty.
That's why we've made it our mission to connect every military hero in need with a canine hero of their own. To learn about the simple ways you can help Dog Chow in our mission, visit dogchow.com/veterans.
She's so smooth, so... I'm interrupting my own shower to remind you to treat your skin like the queen she is with Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash, packed with Olay's highest level of vitamin B3 complex. It's so moisturizing that it will give you visibly smoother, head-turning skin in just 14 days. People wondering, how'd she get so smooth? Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash. Also, try Olay Hyaluronic Body Lotion.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
We continue now with Philippe Cousteau Jr., son of Philippe Cousteau Sr., and grandson of Jacques Cousteau. And we got all that straight. And we're talking about his foundation to build a global youth movement to save the oceans. And he's brought a special young lady with him named Stephanie Akinfalarin. I've been practicing that for 3 days, get that Nigerian last name right. So tell me about your foundation and the role that and the work that Stephanie and others are doing inside of it.
Well, Tavis, we were talking about my grandfather earlier, and one of the things he always told me growing up is that we can't talk about conservation before we talk about education. And I believe that one of the big challenges we face as a conservation movement over the last 40 years is that we have underinvested in building a constituency of young people that can drive the kind of political and economic changes that we need to really tackle these problems. And so we founded Earth Echo International 17 years ago in honor, actually, of my father, Philippe Sr., and my grandfather, and that legacy, with his words of advice, my grandfather's words ringing in my ears, and we've become one of the world's leading ocean education youth leadership organizations. And we have multiple different programs around the world in over 146 countries. We've worked with 2 million youth. But really, it's about helping this next generation with the tools, skills, and knowledge to be the kind of change agents that we need to build a hopeful future. And so one of our main programs, our Youth Leadership Council, works with some of the most extraordinary young people around the world. And I want to level set for just a second, because a lot of people think of youth action and youth leadership, and they might think about beach cleanups, they might think about recycling campaigns, but it's so much more than that. So, for example, one of our youth leaders, Artesh Nash, is working very hard on, and during COVID, developed a technology platform that's tracking acoustic noise in the ocean from shipping, etc., that can disrupt entire ecosystems, and he's turning this into a business and moving forward entrepreneurial. I mean, he's an extraordinary young man. Kai Tran here in California has worked with the Chumash Heritage Tribal Council to develop a national action campaign to help establish, which is in the final stages, the first ever tribally led nominated marine sanctuary, the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary here in California. And so we have young people working in policy, young people working as entrepreneurs, and Stephanie is one of our extraordinary young leaders on the Youth Leadership Council, and I want her to talk a little bit about what she does, because she is an example of how hopeful and bright the future is.
Stephanie, take it away.
Thank you so much. I just joined the Youth Leadership Council this year, and I've already, last weekend, we hosted a summit to, introduce environmentalism to youth, and to talk about, issues that are really important to talk about in communities, and to hear what their thoughts are on these problems, and to bring those thoughts to government officials. And outside of that, I've been really involved in environmentalism for a while. I am not really into science like that, and I was wondering, okay, how can I get involved in this? And I started doing beach cleanups. I started doing some writing. I was into art, and that's how, and I was also part of the Aquarium of the Pacific Ocean Neighbors volunteer program. I did a bunch of things that I felt was a way to advocate for environmentalism, which was quite different from what I've seen to be the best way to advocate for that. So there was art, writing. I was involved in the World of 7 Billion video contest, in which I got second place. And so I've done a bunch of different things that are probably not the most traditional way, if you can say, to advocate for environmentalism. And I think that, oftentimes you would see a lot of people go into sciences and research, and I did something quite different to that, something that I felt very passionate.
When we come forward, I want to talk about those non-traditional ways. And I'm really fascinated, given that you are obviously a person of color as a Nigerian. I'm curious as to whether or not you are seeing your friends of color responding to this as well. When we think of the environmental movement and environmental efforts, we tend to think of a movement that does not include, or put another way, that excludes voices and people of color. So I'm glad that you are a person of color. For a lot of reasons, I'm glad about that. But I'm curious when we come forward about whether or not other persons of color, your friends, are as interested in this as you are. We'll talk about that when we come forward. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions because we've got your black. Listen up. If you're one of the more than 100,000 California tenants who were rejected or delayed when applying for COVID rental assistance, you've got a second chance. Under the terms of a new settlement, California's Housing and Community Development Department agreed to audit its past denials. The program ended in March 2022, but the advocacy groups Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, Policy Link, and Strategic Actions for a Just Economy sued the department. According to the coalition's analysis of state data, the department rejected nearly 30% of all applicants. Under the settlement, the department agreed to clear all renters in the pipeline within 6 months. The settlement applies to anyone who sought assistance from the state's Housing is Key program before April 1st, 2022, whose applications is pending or was denied after June 6, 2022. Tenants who have questions about the status of their application can call the hotline at 833-430-2122. That's 833-430-2122. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Shop Black Friday every day at Lowe's and get the best new deals all month. Right now, shop the lowest prices of the year on select major appliances and save an extra $100 for every $800 you spend on select major appliances. Plus, bring home a Little Giant 14.3-foot multi-position ladder. Was $169, now $99. Because Lowe's knows deals. Valid through 11/8. Appliance savings vary based on purchase amount. Exclusions apply while supplies last. Selection varies by location. See Lowe's.com for details.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
Stephanie Akinfalaran, you were telling me your backstory and how you came to this, and I was asking whether or not you are seeing other students of color who find interest in this work.
Yeah, I think I do. More like even recently now. I know earlier I mentioned like the crisis that took place in my hometown, Carson, and where there was the odor, the very distinct like rotten egg smell coming off of the Dominguez Channel from the dumping from the factories, and it was very prominent in the city. A lot of people were getting sick, and it was making people lightheaded, and it was terrible. And I feel like as Carson is predominantly a community of color, like I know people that live in Carson with me, and I think it was very enraging, and I feel that like things like this happening more often in communities of color kind of ignite that fire to be like, hey, something should be done about this. And also I would add, because this isn't just environmentalism, like environmental issues take place all around the world, so we see a lot of diverse people from different countries also talking about this, and I feel like that's what Earth Eco really stands for, hearing from youth of all around the world and to talk about this. So that side of diversity also comes in terms of different views and perspectives and methods on how to tackle these issues.
I went to Carson for dinner one night. I have a friend of mine who owns a great restaurant there called Uncle Daryl's. And I went to that restaurant one night, and I got out of that car, and I smelled that smell. It was all in the news because your neighborhood. It was just funky. It was a horrible. I said, "What is that?" And it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And to your point about environmental racism, that would not have lasted in Beverly Hills or any place else, any other community. That smell would not have been allowed to just continue unabated for that many weeks, making people sick, people going to hotels, people going to hospitals. It was horrible, but so many communities of color get impacted and infected, frankly, by that kind of environmental racism. I got 60 seconds to go. I'll give the last word to you, Philippe. Tell me what your hope and dream is for this foundation and the work that you are doing with young people like Stephanie.
To continue to build a global movement that is representative of all communities, all faiths, all people. Because if we're not all in this together, we're not going to solve these problems. And oftentimes, these historically neglected communities are on the front lines of these issues. We need to build young people that have the agency and the power and the knowledge to make their voices heard and affect change.
And where do people go to learn more about the program?
I can go to EarthEcho, EarthEcho.org.
EarthEcho.org. Philippe, you're part of a grand legacy, and I know you're proud of that, as you should be. So thank you for your work and witness ongoing that your family started long ago. Thank you for that. Thank you for the foundation. And Stephanie, thank you for coming in to see us and for the work that you were doing and pulling your friends and do this work. And I look forward to talking to you both somewhere else down the road. Thank you for your time.
Real pleasure.
Good to have you both on our program. 1 more hour to go. Willie, Tyler, and Lester, did you have any idea that ventriloquism goes all the way back to ancient Egypt? The master, the foremost modern-day black ventriloquist, joins us live in studio in a moment. Willie, Tyler, and Lester on Tavis.
Testified she wasn't involved in putting financial statements together, but emails